22. Awareness overcomes distractions. When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, it distracts them. Chapter 22. When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. Viktor Frankl. Conquer your bad habits, or they will conquer you. Rob Gilbert. When you are habitually distracted with instant gratification and trivial things, you eventually become indifferent toward your goals. You are satisfying the human need for fulfillment and purpose through small pleasures that promise you both, deliver neither, yet keep you addicted for more. Mindful self-discipline aims to break this vicious cycle and deliver you happiness on your own terms. Socrates taught us that every person always seeks their own good in every situation as perceived in the moment. When you drink alcohol or spend hours on social media, you do so seeking what feels good. And so too, when you work out on an important project, engage in altruistic action, or choose to work out every morning. When you yell at your partner, you also do that because it feels good. The criminal who pulls the trigger also does so because it feels good, or because he thinks it will help him get things that will feel good. The concept of good varies from person to person, but not the basic fact that we all seek what feels good. To know what our higher good is and the right way to seek it is the pursuit of wisdom, philosophy, and spirituality. See chapter 39. Our brain is wired to want to feel good. It spends part of its energy wanting to survive and the rest of it seeking what feels good in your body, mind, and emotions. Once the brain is feeling good, for that moment, this seeking energy, motivation, subsides as you feel satisfied and there's no point in making any further action. When this experience then wears off, the cycle begins again. You cannot change how the brain works, but you can decide how you spend your seeking energy, the type of good you pursue. If you spend it pursuing quick bouts of pleasure, there will be no energy left to pursue your deeper good, your aspiration. Pleasures are the fast food of happiness. You can get them quickly and inexpensively, but they won't fulfill you. They don't have the nutrients you really need. In the long term, they will only make you sick. Pleasures are a depreciating asset. The more you have them, the less happiness they deliver. Self-discipline is a much better investment. There is an emptiness in your soul that needs to be filled by actualizing your aspiration, living your values, and achieving your goals. That process takes time and often involves much effort. Meanwhile, you are tantalized by instant gratification. Every time you engage in it, though, you make a poor investment of your precious motivation energy. It's okay to have pleasure and comfort, too, in a balanced way. Self-discipline needs to be balanced, otherwise you may burn out. See chapter 3. But if that is how you quench most of your brain's thirst for happiness, then you are settling for very little. You are living on the surface. The challenge. Between long-term goals, purpose, and short-term pleasures, instant gratification, what option will your brain often choose? Instant gratification. Unless you have developed a deep aspiration and effective awareness tools, the first two pillars of mindful self-discipline. Distractions and temptations make you look away and forget about your goal. As a result, you lose part of your mojo. Your purpose loses power. You become a bit indifferent to it. So it is extremely important in the path of mindful self-discipline that you learn how to manage distractions and temptations by developing greater self-awareness and self-control. These skills will only become more essential as in our modern world, the distractions and instant gratification opportunities are becoming more abundant, easier to access, more engaging, and addictive. Self-discipline will become rarer. This means that those who have discipline will easily stand apart and reap greater fruits. They will lead and they will push the world forward. Even a little self-discipline will go a long way. This is the purpose of this chapter, to learn how to deal with distractions and temptations so we don't become indifferent to our long-term goals. Let us start by looking at how dopamine, the brain chemical for motivation and wanting, works. If you have any addictions or bad habits you wish to drop, who doesn't? This section will probably be one of the most important ones for you in this book. Dopamine in your brain. Do not bite at the bait of pleasure till you know there's no hook beneath it. Thomas Jefferson. Contrary to popular belief, dopamine is not the pleasure chemical, it is the arousal chemical. Dopamine is the neurochemical your brain releases whenever it recognizes an opportunity for a reward, either real or imagined. This chemical creates feelings of alertness, craving, and arousal. We become motivated to take action in order to get that reward, and until we do, we are in a state of anxiety and restlessness. When we do achieve the reward, dopamine quiets down, and that relief is perceived as a state of pleasure or satisfaction. In her bestseller, The Willpower Instinct, Kelly McGonigal, PhD, makes the point that dopamine itself is not a feeling of happiness or pleasure. Rather, it is a state of restlessness, stress, and discontentment, often accompanied by a burning sensation or feeling of life and death emergency. Even if you know from past experiences that the reward doesn't live up to the expectation, dopamine will show up and tempt you. Once you do achieve the object of desire, however, you get more pleasure from the ending of the restless state of mind created by craving than by doing the enjoyment of the object of desire itself. In a way, you are just back to the status quo. McGonigal concludes along the same lines as the Buddha and other spiritual masters, saying that we confuse desire with happiness. We are all addicted to dopamine, and we are exposed to thousands of marketing messages every day that are skillfully designed to exploit that human weakness. Yet dopamine is not a bad thing. It is not a defect of the brain. It has many positive functions in our life, such as promoting healthy motivation, focus, working memory, and a bunch of other things. If we are low in dopamine, we will experience low vitality, poor concentration, low sex drive, fatigue, apathy, and difficulty sleeping. In fact, mental health challenges such as depression, ADHD, and addiction are characterized by a dopamine deficiency. So we need adequate dopamine levels to be a functional human being. Dopamine is not the problem. The way you seek to experience it is. When you can delay the experience of the reward, dopamine motivates you to stay on track. It keeps you focused and motivated. It keeps you focused and resourceful. However, when you seek to experience high but brief bursts of dopamine repeatedly, instant gratification, that wears out your motivation. It can also lead to addiction. Right after experiencing the reward we were so anxiously seeking, dopamine levels often drop considerably, and with that, our ability to motivate ourselves and keep focused on long-term goals. Not only that, but constant overexposure to dopamine causes the dopamine receptors to leave the membrane, making the membrane less sensitive to stimulation. Your body does that to protect itself from overstimulation. That is why the 10th scoop of ice cream doesn't feel as pleasurable as the first. This is known as pleasure downregulation. The more pleasure you have, the less joy you will get from it. Psychologist Douglas Lyle, in his TEDx talk on the pleasure trap, describes a curious bird experiment. When a bird in a cage had the ability to hit a button that would flood its brain with cocaine, it did that all the time. It skipped eating and mating and just kept pushing that button until it died 14 days later. Dr. Lyle explains that the bird's brain was acting on the primal instinct of doing what feels good and at the same time saving energy. Yet it was actually leading to self-destruction because of the wrong cue from the environment. He concludes that whenever you use a supernormal stimulus, you get addicted and run a risk of making huge mistakes and harming yourself. The term supernormal stimulus was coined by the Nobel Prize winning biologist Nicholas Tinbergen and refers to a stimulus that is not part of our natural environment and thus our brain is not prepared to handle it. Our modern life is not too different from that bird in a cage. While we, thankfully, don't have a button that floods cocaine into our bloodstream, we do have many other buttons that give us an instant rush of dopamine. We have multiple sources of high stimulus, equally as accessible and seemingly inconsequential. In fact, everything around us is designed to distract us and to lure us in with the power of dopamine. It's all around us in shopping centers, social media, and almost every app in our phones. We are being trained to be addicted to easy dopamine because that is very profitable for most companies. Indeed, promises of quick dopamine are the engine of marketing. This is a big problem because repeated short bursts of dopamine lowers our baseline dopamine levels, and by doing that, it reduces our motivation, willpower, and ability to focus. A lower dopamine baseline has also been linked to depression and suicide. Dopamine is what generates energy that drives us to pursue our goals. If you keep bringing that energy back to zero every day by indulging in instant gratification, is it at all surprising that you don't feel so driven to seek your long-term goals? The trap of easy dopamine. Our appetite for easy dopamine is what makes self-discipline difficult. Every time you get a like on your Instagram picture, watch another funny video, play an addictive game, get sexually aroused, drink alcohol, or go for that chocolate cake, your brain produces a strong hit of dopamine, and it doesn't take much effort. Once you fall into the habit of seeking easy dopamine, it becomes increasingly harder to motivate yourself to go after your higher goals and values. With every indulgence, your self-esteem, your self-discipline, and willpower weaken, and your important goals become more distant. Endless access to quick dopamine leads to a meaningless life. The worst part is that after a while, your habit is completely automatic. You hurt yourself little by little without even noticing it, just like that unfortunate bird in the cage. The way to reverse this vicious cycle is to first develop the ability to see what you are doing, awareness, and then to refrain from activities that give you a quick shot of dopamine, willpower. Instead of seeking instant gratification, you then do activities that increase your dopamine baseline, such as physical exercise, learning, working on long-term goals, and meditation. This will make you more motivated, more focused, and less dependent on constant stimulation. By developing self-discipline and learning how to manage your dopamine, you experience not only more long-term fulfillment, but more pleasure too, because you are no longer desensitizing yourself. Such is the paradox of pleasure. Seek it and you will lose it. Forsake it and it will follow you like a shadow. Coming back to our opening point, your brain is hardwired to seek what feels good. It will always push you toward the highest perceived reward in the moment. The problem is that the highest reward is often not the highest perceived reward. The way around this is to increase the perceived reward for your long-term goals in relation to short-term pleasures, aspiration pillar, and to keep this insight top of mind day after day, especially when you find yourself facing self-control challenges, awareness pillar. Remember, the brain's first priority is to survive and avoid pain. The second is to seek pleasure. For survival, saving energy is important. That is why instant gratification is so appealing to your brain. It promises what it wants, pleasure, with minimum expenditure of energy. This ancient mechanism of the brain worked well when the only goal was survival, but it is self-defeating in our modern life when the goal is self-actualization, growth, and fulfillment. Quick dopamine makes you indifferent to your aspiration and higher virtues because you satisfy part of that thirst for achievement and satisfaction 100 times each day through small pleasures that distract you from your goal and disperse your energy. Naturally, when you are able to do that so easily and apparently without consequences, you will begin to feel less strongly about the most important goals in your life, which are uncertain and require a lot of effort to achieve. Constantly seeking quick bursts of dopamine also hurts your long-term goals another way by keeping your working memory busy. It is like part of your awareness is always unavailable because it is trapped in pleasure-seeking thoughts in the background. The temptations then more easily enter your mind and capture your attention because they are right there in front of you. They feel more concrete and tangible than your long-term goals. That is why it is essential to cultivate awareness so you can redirect your attention back to your goals. Otherwise, you will just indulge without even noticing. Finally, habitual overindulgence in instant gratification can actually hurt your brain. This has been seen when studying brain scans of addicts. The prefrontal cortex area responsible for awareness, conscious thinking, and willpower gets weakened and less active. That is the hidden sacrifice you are making through overindulgence in your addictive activity of choice. It won't suck. At this point, you may have clearly seen the cost of junk dopamine and be intellectually convinced of its harm. Yet there may still be resistance in you. Part of you may feel that giving up pleasures means giving up the joys of life. You may fear that your life will become dull, boring, and dry. This is not what happens. You might experience that for a few days or weeks in the transition phase, but soon it becomes clear that your quality of life has actually increased. Researcher Wilhelm Hoffman and his colleagues did some studies on this topic with the purpose of understanding how practicing self-control affects life satisfaction. They found that even though people experience pleasure when indulging in a temptation, that spike of happiness was short-lived and soon received a correction. People felt less happy after indulging. There are several possible reasons for this. First is that experiencing pleasures, even repeatedly, does not increase your baseline happiness. They may offer temporary relief from feelings of boredom and emotional distress, but they do nothing to change how you feel in the long run. Second is that there's also pleasure and a sense of satisfaction in pursuing long-term goals. You feel good about yourself, and this feeling often lasts much longer than indulging in short-term pleasures. We need to enhance our awareness of this fact by remembering it often. Third, many of the pleasurable activities we seek come with considerable side effects to our physical and mental health. Think of obesity, alcoholism, social media addiction, and short attention spans. Finally, as already covered, there is a natural down-regulation of pleasure in our nervous system. The more we have it, the less we appreciate it. Do you want to live a more meaningful and also more pleasant life? Sacrifice thy pleasures at the altar of thy aspiration. Having more self-control is not only good for your long-term goals and aspirations, but it actually makes you live a better life. Research shows that people with strong self-control are happier with themselves, experience fewer negative emotions, and actually appreciate pleasure even more. A self-disciplined life is a good life. Wise sacrifice leads to fulfillment, not self-denial. More self-control equals more self-esteem, stronger willpower, greater life satisfaction, and better health. What sacrifice are you making? In chapter 13, we saw that sacrifice is inevitable, that whenever you choose one thing, you are saying no to 1,000 other things. Well, when you say yes to instant gratification in an unconscious or unbalanced way, you are saying no to your goals and weakening your willpower. You are saying no to your aspiration. You are delaying the actualization of your highest values and hurting your future self. Success, growth, and fulfillment require some sacrifice. Otherwise, everybody will be healthy, wealthy, wise, in shape, accomplished, and enlightened. You yet look around you. What about you? What are your sources of quick dopamine? How are you leaking your own energy of will, focus, and motivation? Spend some time reflecting on that so you can become more aware and make changes. Once you are fully aware of the problem, how it plays out in your life, and its consequences, let's talk about what you should aim for instead. The shift. First, purpose, then pleasure. The secret to success is learning how to use pain and pleasure instead of having pain and pleasure use you. Anthony Robbins. A good life has space for both your aspirations and your pleasures, and this is what mindful self-discipline is about. It is balanced. See chapter 3. This balance is achieved by prioritizing your long-term goals, but leaving space for short-term joys too. Otherwise, if your self-discipline gets unbalanced, you are more likely to experience willpower fatigue, and with that, indulging in easy dopamine hits becomes much easier. So it's not that you should remove all sources of pleasure or instant gratification from your life. It is rather about prioritizing the most important things in your life and allowing the pursuit of pleasure to be secondary. It's about having islands of pleasure in a sea of meaning and not islands of meaning in a sea of pleasure. The most important thing is to keep the most important thing the most important thing. Donald P. Conduto. For most of us, the pursuit of pleasure is taking far too much of our time, attention, and energy. We have allowed jump dopamine to become ubiquitous, ubiquitous in our society and in our lives, unaware of the consequences. We are enjoying fun, comfort, and distractions compulsively and at the expense of our most important goals. If we want to radically change for the better, reclaim our power, and fulfill our goals, we urgently need to review the role of pleasure in our life. Instant gratification should be a treat or a reward, not a default. It should be something we indulge in consciously, not compulsively. It should be something that lightens up our life and not something that attempts to cover up and underline an emptiness. There is an analogy that illustrates this point. It's an old story popularized by Stephen Covey, author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Imagine your life is like a jar, and next to it you have rocks, pebbles, and sand. The rocks are your meaningful goals and your higher value and all the steps that help you achieve them. They are the things that truly give you a sense of lasting satisfaction and fulfillment. Without them, there is a sense of emptiness in life, and you experience regret. The pebbles are things that are important, but not critical. They are the minor goals, activities that are urgent but not essential, and external values such as money, status, recognition, and pleasing others. The sand is pleasure, comfort, pastimes, busyness, and everything else. If you fill your jar first with sand or pebbles, there will be no place left for the rocks. But if you first put in all the rocks, then the pebbles, and then the sand, there is space for everything else. Look at this demonstration. How is the jar of your life? Mindful self-discipline is about prioritizing your highest values, your aspiration, and long-term goals. Start with that, and then pleasure can fill in whatever gaps are left. This will allow you to replace the junk dopamine hits by longer-term and healthier dopamine. It will also allow you to enjoy the small pleasures of life guilt-free and appreciate them much more. This is the only way I know how to have the cake, aspiration, and eat it too, pleasures. You can then enjoy life's pleasures freely as long as you keep your balance. If you need a more practical guideline, think of applying the Pareto principle. Dedicate 80% of your available time, money, and energy to things that advance your highest values and goals, and 20% in pleasures and distractions. Or, if you are really ambitious, you can make it 90-10. How do you make this shift from seeking pleasure to seeking fulfillment, from favoring short-term goals to favoring long-term goals, from junk dopamine to healthy dopamine? You can use the shift your focus method in chapter 18 to zoom out from the temptation in front of you and refocus on your long-term goals, or the shift your perception method, chapter 19, to make the distraction feel less appealing. Or you can use one of the three methods explained in the rest of this chapter, which are specific to dealing with distractions. Method number 1, the monk week, dopamine detox. The first method is to go on a dopamine detox, a period in your life where you avoid all junk dopamine and cultivate presence, contentment, and focused work. You basically go into monk mode on all distractions and temptations. It's a true life reset. Consider this your initiation ritual into mindful self-discipline. During the monk week, you completely cut out all of your sources of distractions and junk dopamine, or at least you keep them to a bare minimum if related to real family needs or work needs. Here are some examples of things to cut out during this experiment. Comfort foods, sugar, snacks, coffee, alcohol, and fast food. Email and messaging apps, gaming, social media, news, pornography, aimless browsing, time-wasting websites, daydreaming, downloading new apps, entertainment, and emotional addictions, arguing, gossiping, complaining, shaming, etc. You may not be able right now to completely let go of any of these things, and that's okay. But you are certainly able to take 1 week break from them. Even if that becomes the hardest week of your life, unlikely, you are able to do it. The harder it feels, the more it shows how addictive you have become. Where should you do it? You can do it in your own home, or you can change your environment for this dopamine detox, such as going on a retreat. The latter does make things easier. Having said that, you will need to be very mindful about how you transition back to your daily environment. Otherwise, your brain can associate that change with the new environment rather than see it as your new way of being overall. How long should it be? I suggest you try it for a week, and so I call this the monk week. What happens at the end? After the week is finished, review which forms of instant gratification are really worth it and which ones you can do without. You can then add them back as needed, but this time in a more intentional and controlled manner with awareness and temperaments. Be conservative and ruthlessly eliminate the ones that you haven't really missed. For example, let's say that you have the habit of jumping into your email or social media multiple times a day. As soon as the notification dings on your phone or computer, or whenever you have 15 seconds of downtime, it keeps you addicted to junk dopamine, keeps your mind scattered, makes you less present, and breaks the flow of your work. It also makes you more tired and restless as your attention is fragmented. During the monk week, you would limit checking your email to once or twice a day for work purposes and take a complete break from social media, among other things. After the monk week is over, you may realize that you don't need to check email more than twice a day anyway, and you might also decide to only check social media twice a day, 10 minutes each time, and limit it to a single platform. What's the effect of all this on your motivation? During the monk week, you cultivate your hunger for meaning and enjoyment, but you don't satisfy it through trivial activities. You have removed those options from the time being. With every source of junk dopamine that you sacrifice, your energy and motivation rise. Remove one distraction and your focus on your goals will increase. Remove 10 distractions and your focus will be 10 times better. Stay hungry. Steve Jobs. What happens when you cut all sources of instant gratification from your life for a short period of time? Your brain will rebel, and you will need to find another way to experience dopamine. You then make use of that opportunity to train your brain to seek satisfaction through long-term goals. This happens by focusing all the freed up time and energy on your aspiration. Review it daily and act on it daily. Let that be your only source of dopamine. Seek boredom, and then working on your goals will feel like a welcome distraction, a joy. For this to work optimally, though, you need to cut all sources of distractions during this experiment. If you leave a single other source of quick dopamine available, there's a good chance that your brain will channel all its hunger for pleasure there. One of the concepts behind the monk week is that it's easier to experience with these somewhat radical changes all at once for a short period of time than one at a time. This allows you to focus your energy better and to see the impact that all these small dopamine addictions have on your life as a whole. It is often easier to completely abstain than to try to gradually diminish your consumption over a long period of time. The former has very clear black and white rules. The latter involves playing with fire, making many decisions, and being involved in the protracted self-control battle. Echoing this idea, physician Dr. Dean Ornish, in his research on intense lifestyle change, found that it was easier for people to ditch lots of bad habits all at once rather than little by little. The biggest challenge for most of us is digital media, apps, websites, social media, news, YouTube, etc. Unlike other sources of quick dopamine, in modern life, this is not something we can completely go without. Yet these big, shiny dopamine buttons are hijacking your brain with chronic overstimulation. They are destroying your motivation and fragmenting your attention. It's the polar opposite of what meditation and self-discipline are all about. Therefore, It's essential to improve our relationship with digital media. The radical reset of the monk week can be a great beginning for that. During the monk week, make sure to eat enough, sleep well, meditate daily, exercise, and stay connected with your loved ones or to whatever keeps your heart warm. These things help replenish your willpower, and they also balance the emotional hardships that you might face during the week. After you finish your monk week, if you are feeling ambitious, you can try your first monk month, or you can include a monk day once a week. You can even choose to go into monk mode in relation to one addictive activity, completely abstaining from it for good. At the very least, you can practice a monk hour at the beginning of your day, every day, as a morning routine. See chapter 34. Your next step is very simple. Book a time on your calendar for your first monk week. Method number 2. Procrastinate distraction. A difficult lesson to learn. Your most persistent distractions will seem justified to you. James Clear. The monk week and other monk mode variants is a great reset, yet it is something that you schedule for a particular time of the year or a particular day of the week. But how do you deal with distractions at other times? Here's where methods number 2 and number 3 come in. We all know how to procrastinate, but we are all procrastinating the wrong things. We procrastinate doing things that are meaningful but uncomfortable. Rather, we should procrastinate things that are trivial yet comforting. I call this procrastinating distraction. The method is simple. When there is a strong urge to indulge in a distraction, procrastinate it. Keep focused on the work you are doing and leave the distraction for later. Postpone it so that the instant gratification is no longer so instant. When does later become now? That is up to you. For the distractions that you want to completely let go of due to their harmful effects or time-wasting nature, the answer is never. For other types of distractions, you can allow yourself to engage in them as a reward for having made progress in your important goals. In any case, wait at least half an hour for indulging. Again, doing this doesn't lead to a boring life devoid of pleasure. Rather, it makes you cherish the pleasures even more. You first deprive yourself, and then you enjoy it as a treat. The happiness you extract from the experience will be much greater. The one requirement for this method to work, actually for all of the methods to work, is pausing and awareness. You cannot apply it if you are just indulging automatically without ever noticing. If that is the case for you, review the 3 core awareness practices of meditation, reflection, and integration, chapter 16. The more you can slow down and live more mindfully, the easier it will be to become aware of your compulsions and make a different choice about them. Procrastinate distraction is thus a variant of the Paul method, chapter 17. The only difference is that the third step, willpower, is about postponing the distraction and refocusing on your goal. Start by using the 3-breath rule for pausing, P, when you are being tempted by a distraction or any type of urge. Pause and then take 3 deep breaths. Then become aware of the distraction and notice how tempting it feels, A. Finally, make a conscious decision to leave the distraction, pleasure, for later and refocus your goal-promoting activity, W. Do the above process as many times as needed until you complete the work you have set yourself to do. And you don't need to make this hard for yourself. Help your focus by removing the distraction from your line of sight in the meantime. This could mean closing a browser tab, putting your phone in airplane mode or face down and in silent mode, or putting the chocolate bar back in the pantry. Learn more about using the environment to improve your focus in chapter 26 and 33. Slowing down your impulses allows you to see things more clearly and make better choices. At this point, you may wonder why we simply don't resist a temptation altogether with a definite no. It's because in most cases that doesn't work so well. It feels like it's forever a no, and so your mind will rebel and reject that instruction. The renowned psychologist Roy F. Baumeister, co-author of Willpower: Rediscovering the Greatest Human Strength, relates an experiment that explains why this works. People who have told themselves, not now, but later, were less troubled with visions of chocolate cake than the other two groups. Those in the postponement condition actually ate significantly less than those in the self-denial condition. The results suggest that telling yourself, I can have this later, operates in the mind a bit like having it now. It satisfies the craving to some degree and can be even more effective at suppressing the appetite than actually eating the treat. They conclude that it takes willpower to turn down dessert, but apparently it's less stressful in the mind to say later rather than never. In the long run, you end up wanting less and also consuming less. Alcoholics Anonymous also use a version of this principle. The commitment that they make to follow their program is, I will not drink today. This is much more doable than I will never drink again. You trick your brain by postponing the temptation every single day, indefinitely. Unlike the monk week, this method is simple and easy to implement. Take a moment right now to choose one distraction that you will procrastinate on. Make a firm commitment to remember to practice procrastinating distraction in relation to that temptation, or have some form of external reminder to bring you back to this exercise. Journal about it every night for extra accountability and self-awareness. Method number 3, commitment devices. A commitment device is a deliberate choice that you make today to restrict your options of tomorrow with the intention of helping your future self practice self-control and stay on track with your goals. It is designed to create a buffer against your future urges and environmental pressures. The classic example of commitment device is a story of the sirens in Greek mythology. The sirens were dangerous creatures who lured nearby sailors with their enchanting music, causing them to crash their ships into the rocks. In the ancient tale, Ulysses, from Odysseus, wanted to hear the siren's song without jumping overboard or crashing his ship, so he ordered his men to lash his body to the mast of the ship. The choice was a commitment device which restricted his future choices, preventing himself from acting on impulse. What are your sirens? How will you tie yourself to the mast? In our modern life, a commitment device could be choosing to delete social media apps from your phone or block time-wasting websites on your browser so you can't use them when you feel bored or want to procrastinate. It could be buying a long-term gym membership or online subscription so that breaking your commitment has financial consequences. Another example is not keeping chocolate or chips in the house so that unhealthy snacks are just not the option when you wake up at 2 a.m. looking for something to munch. There are also several browser plugins that you can use to limit your time on certain websites, wipe out your Facebook or Twitter feeds, and hide the black hole known as related videos on YouTube. Some people like to formally create a contract with a friend or family member where they commit to achieve a goal within a certain time frame and place a deposit. You only get your deposit back if you achieve your goal. If not, you lose it in favor of anti-charity, an organization that you'd hate to give your money to. Or, instead of a financial consequence, It could also be a social one. For example, in case of failure, your friend has to release embarrassing photos of you on social media. There are many ways to create a commitment device, and you can get creative. The whole purpose is making your self-control failure impossible, or at the least, adding a consequence bad enough to stop you in your tracks and prevent you from indulging. Key points. In this chapter, you learned about dopamine, the trap of instant gratification, and the need for prioritizing your aspiration on top of pleasures. You learned 3 powerful methods for dealing with distractions, in addition to previous methods of the awareness pillar. In case you feel unsure which one to focus on, here's a quick map of how they all fit together. Distraction solutions. Monk Week, procrastination distraction, shift your focus, shift your perspection, and commitment devices. Indifference happens when you don't care enough about your goal or aspiration anymore because you got distracted with something else. You are satisfying the human need for fulfillment and purpose through small pleasures that promise you both, deliver none, yet keep you addicted for more. Pleasures are the fast food of happiness. You get them quickly and inexpensively, but they won't fulfill you. They don't have the nutrients you really need. You cannot change how the brain works, but you can decide how you spend your seeking energy, the type of good you pursue. If you spend it pursuing quick bouts of pleasure, there will be no energy left to pursue your deeper good, your aspiration. This is a poor investment. You need healthy levels of dopamine to function well in life, so the problem is not dopamine, but the way we seek to experience it. When you can delay the experience of a reward, dopamine motivates you to stay on track. It keeps you focused and resourceful. However, when we seek to experience high but brief bursts of dopamine repeatedly, instant gratification, that wears out our motivation and can lead to addiction. Our brain doesn't know how to deal with the many sources of supernormal stimuli in our modern environment, so it becomes addicted to easy dopamine. You need to end this vicious cycle by developing awareness, limiting activities that give you a quick shot of dopamine, and instead focusing on activities that increase your baseline dopamine, such as physical exercise, learning, and meditation. Prioritizing long-term goals over instant gratification will not make your life boring or dry. On the contrary, research shows that with greater self-control, your happiness and life satisfaction actually increase. Short-lived pleasures, on the other hand, soon get a correction and don't change how you feel in the long term. A good life has both aspirations and pleasures. This balance is achieved by prioritizing your long-term goals, but leaving space for short-term joys too. Rocks, pebbles, and sand analogy. This will allow you to replace the junk dopamine hits by longer-term and healthier dopamine hits. It will also allow you to enjoy the small pleasures of life guilt-free and appreciate them much more. Instant gratification should be a treat or reward, not our default. It should be something that we indulge in consciously, not compulsively. It should be something that enhances our well-being and not something that attempts to cover up an underlying emptiness. Pareto principle: dedicate 80% of your available time, money, and energy on things that advance your highest values and goals, and 20% on pleasures and distractions. Or, if you are really ambitious, you can make it 90-10. Method number 1, the Monk Week. Go on a dopamine detox for 1 week where you avoid all distractions and temptations and instead cultivate presence, contentment, and focused work. Satisfy your hunger for meaning and enjoyment through long-term goals rather than instant gratification. Method number 2, Procrastinate distraction. When there's a strong urge to indulge in a distraction, procrastinate it. Keep focused on the work you are doing and leave the distraction for later so that the instant gratification is no longer so instant. This is a variant of the Paul method. Method 3. Commitment devices. Make a deliberate choice today to restrict your options of tomorrow with the intention of helping your future self to practice self-control and stay on track with your goals. Chapter 23.